so we are here with Wendy Peters, and this is part of Blend Connections program called Ancient Wisdom for Modern Day Practitioners. So, welcome, Wendy. Thank you so much for joining us this morning in this video call. This is exciting. I've never done this before, so we have any technical errors. There's my disclaimer. So, when I met you, it was when the Waitaha Grandmothers first arrived in Texas and went to Aquarina Springs. So, one of the things I was curious about, and I didn't actually add this to the questions, was how did you get connected to this group of women?
Well, one of the family that I am associated with, because there are a number of different family lines in the Waitaha group. The family that I'm associated with, the eldest sister, because they are a matriarchal society, the eldest sister is their current chiefess, if you will, and so she is, I guess you would say, the highest ranking of the grandmothers. She speaks for the nation of Waitaha, and but they are a large family line. And what I mean by that is there, like I said, there are several family lines among the grandmothers, but this particular family, I think they had like 8 or 9 children. So, but Ko, who you met, Ko is the eldest, and I am very closely tied, if you will, to one of Ko's youngest brothers. He is not the youngest brother, but he is one of the youngest brothers, named Raymond. He was the gentleman in the wheelchair that you met. Raymond is one of the youngest brothers, and we both live here in Ohio. He lives about 15-20 minute drive away from me, and but we've been very close for about 10 years. He lives part of the year in New Zealand and part of the year here in Ohio. And I met him not long after he first moved to Ohio. And we just were like two fish out of water, and we connected instantly. And our relationship has very much deepened more and more over the years. And in Polynesian culture, we have a tradition called, in Hawaiian, it's called hanai. And in Maori, it's called whangai, because Maori and Hawaiian languages are really just different dialects of the same. And but that's a tradition of adoption, of interfamily adoption, if you will, meaning not so much like in the legal sense that we do in Western society, but in the emotional and familial sense that you really become a part of the family that you are adopted into, regardless of biology, etc., etc. And that is very much a relationship that is honored as much as our family of origin relationships are honored. And like I said, that's very prevalent throughout the society. You will most frequently see that among actual relatives, where someone lost a child or can't have a child, and then they will be given a child from a relative, but that person isn't really giving away their child. They're still one, extended family, but generally speaking, the child will be raised and more closely tied to the people that they're being raised with than, the people that biologically gave birth to them, if you will. So, but in any case, that tradition of adoption is very alive and well in both our societies. And I think it was just a natural relational growth for us, because that is part of both of our cultures. And again, when we met, we were both two fish out of water. And so, for us, it's a little piece of home to have one another way out here in Ohio.
In the middle of the heartlands, in the
It
corn and
exact.
wheat countries. I totally understand. That's where I landed too.
Yeah, and for me, I constantly remind myself, I just don't think it was an accident or coincidence that we found each other way out here. I mean,
Yeah.
there's only a handful of Polynesians that live in this vicinity anyhow, and we all know each other.
Yes.
But yeah, I really don't think it's any coincidence that we not only met but struck up such a closely tied relationship with one another. I really feel that we were destined to be family, and we are. And that being said, Raymond is married, and his wife is very much like a sister to me as well. So
Wow.
when I say closely tied, my husband and I, our families are very, very closely tied.
Yes.
And
What
for
a
me, for all intents and purposes, we are related regardless of biology.
Oh, absolutely. And what a blessing that is to have your extended family around your realm too. That makes such a huge difference in the support you get to in connection to your people. So, yeah. You're about to say something?
No, just more than you can know. I mean, I don't want to go into all the details, but very much so. That is very accurate statement.
So, I understand that you have a PhD, and when I talked to you in San Marcos, you had done your studies in, was it like ancient wisdom or ancient teachings? I just wanted
Um,
to clarify that with you.
my doctorate is in psychology
Mm-hmm.
with an emphasis in transpersonal psychology, which is more of a holistic approach to psychology.
Yes.
And but my area of specialization and expertise is predominantly indigenous wisdom, which goes all the way back to the ancient times, because I really started out on a journey to um, uncover the authentic wisdom of first my people, which would be the Hawaiians, and then that naturally branched off into like our languages, like the
Mm-hmm.
Maori. Like I said, they're really dialectic from the same base language. The farther back you go in our languages, for most Polynesian languages, what you will find is, instead of being dialectic, because that happened as a result of the cultural branching that took place. But the farther back you go, the more the languages become the same. The
Yes.
names of the ancient, the names of the ancient deities, a lot of the ancient terminology, the sayings, again, the older it is, the more similar it is to as much as many of the words are and the vocabulary is actually identical. So in Maori, for instance, they use R's where Hawaiians use L's, and so there's just a substitution of letters, but
Sure.
the words are very, very similar. But in the more ancient components of the language,
Mm-hmm.
there isn't even that difference. They are identical. So as you can see, the farther back you go, the more closely tied we become. And that was part of my journey in seeking out my own the wisdom of my own ancestry. I learned who we are tied to, and more about the origins of our history itself, in addition to the wisdom of the healing arts and so on and so forth.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
and one of the things that you answered, actually, one of the first question, which was what ancient tradition are you a part of? Because you talked a little bit about the Hawaiian culture and its relationship to the Maori culture. Um, would you say that perhaps the Maori, the Waitaha, the Hawaiians maybe came from one culture initially that broke off?
Oh,
Or
I
how would you explain that?
well, it's a little more complex than that, but basically, um, not to speak for the Waitaha, I will only speak for what I was taught, but I cannot speak with any type of authority for Waitaha. That would have to come from Cole
Yes.
or Raymond
Yes.
or
Yes.
somebody from the family line. But what I was taught was that, between 10 and 15,000 years ago, and I know that's a big span, but, because time is a construct of uh, Western paradigms, it's
Yes.
not something that, we kept that close track of. But between 10 and 15,000 years ago, there were a group of people specifically selected for their skills, their physical, what a their physical stature, if you will. They had to be healthy. They had to be this or that, a certain sex, a certain age. But they were each handpicked, and they were tasked by the ancient grandmothers of that time, um, according to a prophecy that was given to them, that change was imminent, and that to avoid being annihilated, they took these people and sent them off in these canoes into the Pacific Ocean to um, to save the populace, if you will, to save. and
Yes.
and so their task was to go and find a new home, and to perpetuate the lineage, if you will, until the prophecy called them home. In more recent years, the Waitaha have kept this wisdom, these stories, this lineage intact for, I believe it's about 87 or more generations,
Wow.
believe it or not, 87 generations,
It's huge.
several thousand years, they've held this wisdom, and they've passed it down from generation to generation. And like I said, in recent years, the grandmothers were told that it was time to bring the stories back and bring them back into the world instead of keeping them hidden and protected, that it was time to share the stories with the world.
Wow.
And so, as a result of that, you see, people, the grandmothers of Waitaha and people like Raymond, have gone out into the world, and they don't call themselves teachers, but they do, in the appropriate forum, they will share some of their wisdom and the stories that they've held. Where where I come into this, not personally, but where the Hawaiians come into this, is that the history of Polynesia, uh, for Polynesians, speaks of a very active migration amongst the Polynesian peoples. Western archaeology, they characterize it as, there's these rare canoe trips that, if survivable, these people, like Gilligan's Island, they accidentally landed on this island and then they started a colony. That's not how I was taught, and what I know of my ancestry and history. It's more that they had a very active community amongst the entire Pacific region, or what we would call Pacifica. And they, just the way we jump in our car and either you're in Austin or San Marcos or whatever, you would drive to San Marcos or drive down to San Antonio, they would literally get in their canoes and make a journey over to the different sets of islands to trade, what do I want to say? I don't know the term, but they knew that incest would corrupt the gene pool, so to speak, and so they didn't, because they were small populations on islands, they knew that that they only intermarried if they had to. They knew that they had to, exchange bloodlines in order to keep the gene pool strong. So what you have was a fairly regular migration amongst the various Polynesian tribes, and of course, very much like Native Americans or all, indigenous peoples, where the the prime directive, if you will, is survival mode, meaning procreation, as it not just sustenance and food, but procreation.
Yes.
They would go and uh, conquer one another. When I don't mean it in the Western way, I just mean that they would have battles. They would take women and children or whatever to marry and reproduce, and they would keep doing this to one another all the time. So Raymond's family, being a May society, they would and they're people of peace. They were pacifists.
Mm-hmm.
They would
Yes.
immediately surrender to these invading tribes, and the men would be killed, and the women and children would be taken. But here's the thing: being a matriarchal tribe, when these women and children were taken and they began repopulating, guess who was rearing the children and teaching them? And so then what would happen is
Wow.
they would be taken over, and they would yet again transform back into who they were, because it's the mothers that were having the children and teaching and raising the children. So in that sense, they almost could never truly be taken over. By the same token, there were other tribes and other peoples that were taken over and that became the other peoples.
Yes.
And this is the case for all the Polynesian peoples, but the Hawaiian and Maori people definitely come from the same root stock, or the same gene pool, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And of all the Polynesian tribes, which they say there are 6 Polynesian tribes, the Maori and the Hawaiians are actually, I think, most closely related genetically.
Wow.
And you can even see that. And we were talking about that in Texas, where you could put us all into a room, and if we kept our mouths closed, genetically you couldn't tell us apart. Physically,
Wow.
we
Yeah.
look similar. It's only when we start talking, because of course, they have that New Zealand accent or whatever. But if you threw a bunch of Samoans or Tahitians in the room, more than likely I could tell them apart. But even me as a Hawaiian, and I'm very adept to the physical features of those peoples, I have a difficult time telling Hawaiians and Maori apart, except for when you start interacting socially, and then you can tell by the way they talk and everything. But yeah, we are some of the most closely related peoples, and that happened as a result of what I was telling you, that inter-island exchanges, whether it was for food, trade, new genes or whatever. That's how that happened.
Well, I have a question then between the difference between the Maori and the Waitaha. Is there any kind of a difference between these two nations, or are they essentially the similar nation?
Well, when you say difference, of course, for modern times, there's a huge difference. Mm-hmm. Because they've been colonized. Maori people have been colonized by the British, mm-hmm. and Hawaiians actually are truly disenfranchised indigenous people, because mm-hmm. we don't really even have any sovereign rights or status as Native Americans would, or Native Alaskans do. But the Maori, like many indigenous peoples, like the Native Americans, are made up of groups of tribes or tribal nations, if you will. Waitaha is a very small tribal nation amongst the larger group of the Maori people. And the word Maori, which is the word Maoli in Hawaiian, you substitute the R for an L, it really just means people, mm-hmm. the people. And so it doesn't connotate any particular race or tribe. It really is a general terminology for people in general. But it came in New Zealand, it came to differentiate the indigenous from the non-indigenous. Okay. And in Hawaii, we don't even call ourselves, I mean, the word still exists in our language, but we don't even call ourselves, we used to call ourselves Kanaka Maoli, which meant the common people, but we don't even do that anymore because again, we are one of the truly disenfranchised indigenous peoples
Yeah.
in this country.
Yeah.
But the difference is culturally, um, again, depending on how far back into ancient times you go, we start out from very similar to really diverging from one another in that the Waitaha have kept their matriarchal traditions. Hawaiians were, if you will, not only colonized, but Hawaiians were integrated into a more a society dominated by Christian thought and by patriarchy. Mm-hmm. So at that time, it wasn't the case prior to Western contact, but at that time, Hawaiians adopted a lot more patriarchal traditions and behaviors. And they also blended a lot of their spiritual traditions and practices with those of Christianity and other Western influences. So in that regard, the more you move into modern history, the more our cultures have diverged from one another. But in the everyday things, in the ancient ways, they are very, very similar. And when I say everyday things, I just mean the things that we value, yes, the things that we believe in. Those are things that the externalities, if you will, of culture seldom change. So, I think we're going to probably start talking about that further in the conversation, so I won't belabor it. And but yeah, so we were more similar. The farther back you go, the more like the language, we were far more similar. And then now there are considerable differences, but those are a result of what we've had to deal with and cope with in changing times and modern things that have come along.
Yes, thank you for sharing so much of that history, because I really wasn't quite sure, so thank you for clarifying that. So one of the things I wanted to ask you specifically was how this ancient knowledge of how ancient wisdom related to healing and helping people in this particular arena of work that I'm interested in. How would this particular information, like the ancient healers, how could this affect modern day practitioners, especially because there's such a huge interest in native wisdom right now, between the Mayans to the Waitaha, to a lot of native tribes in the Hopi. Do you have any suggestions how holistic practitioners of these modern times can use this ancient knowledge and integrate it into their practice to help people during these times?
Well, I hear a lot of things going on in that question, but but if I might, I think there are a few common threads among ancient indigenous healing traditions, and when I say ancient, I think a more appropriate word would be authentic as opposed to ancient, yes, because there are things, there are authentic healing traditions that have their roots back into ancient times, and then there are more new age and synthesized types of healing traditions. that take on a more modern tone, if you will. So I would really like to address the authentic and the alongside the ancient versus the more new age or the synthesized kinds of things, because that was in part, also what my journey of um, delving into all of this realm was about, was because I kept seeing the tourist brand, if you will. You have to remember, I'm from Hawaii, but I was born and raised in Honolulu, like literally just outside of Waikiki. So it's world class, world class tourism. And so I saw the masterful way that things were bottled and packaged and manipulated to all for the almighty dollar. And that's our mode of survival. Tourism is the only industry we have in Hawaii. By the same token, what I was really yearning for in the deepest recesses of my soul was the authenticity. So I went in search of that, and that's how I came to be where I am today. But so I'd like to address the authentic and the indigenous, and I can say that the one thing that I've seen, there are just a couple of, again, common threads or significant thing that stands out, because I haven't necessarily practiced those modes of healing myself, but I've practiced modes of healing, but not all indigenous modes of healing, obviously. But I have also been exposed to authentic indigenous healers from literally all around the world, from Africa to Asia, Nepal, Tibet, South America, even Europeans have indigenous cultures such as the Sami, which are way up in Scandinavia. I don't know my Northern European geography that well, but they are actually indigenous cultures. And what you'll find is, again, in indigenous cultures, you have a lot of commonalities. They're very different, but yet there are common beliefs and values, and that's what I'm getting at. And so what I've seen amongst all of these people worldwide is that common value of non-dual state of consciousness when it comes to healing. And to not be so technical, what I mean is these authentic healers are really connected to spirit. They're really tied in and connected there. There is no separation. It's not the mind and the body. It's all one. It's all connected and it's all related, not just within them, but they sense and they're aware of that connection that exists among all things, between them and the patient the person that they're healing, between them and the tree growing outside the window, between them and the ground that they're walking on. They sense that. That's what I mean by non-dual. There is no separation. Just because you see physical airspace between something, between you and I, there are thousands of miles, and yet we are connected. Mm-hmm. We are connected in a different level, in a different plane, if you will, or dimension, whatever term you want to put on it. And what I've noted regarding healers, authentic or ancient, authentic healers, is that they are very aware of these types of connections, and that's their healing comes through those connections. Yes. And so that's one of the main things that I've noted. The other thing that I would bring forward is that no matter what the problem, no matter what the issue, and no matter the modality of healing, whether you have someone who is a Reiki practitioner, or a body worker, uh, or even just someone who prays for you, no matter what the modality, what what you what I've seen is that the diagnoses are always the same. And so it doesn't matter how they would treat you to help you heal. What I've seen is that they always come up with the same. When I say diagnoses, I don't mean that obviously they can see that you have a broken leg. They all come up with the same story of why you have that broken leg, why you have that broken leg, or why you have cancer, or why your heart is broken, or you have these emotional problems. They Because they're getting their information from spirit, and they all understand that everything that manifests in your reality does in fact have its origins from the spiritual realm. So, like I said, even in the case where it seems like an accident, an innocent accident where you broke your leg, most authentic holistic healers that again practice as a result of an ancient tradition versus a more new age type of philosophy, they will always tell you about the same story of how you came to be in the boat that you're in, or at least they all seem to hold a general consensus of the origins of and the nature of the issue that needs healing. Does that make sense?
It does, actually. It's very, very familiar for me. It's the type of work I do actually works with the human energy field. And I believe one of the most well-known writers, early writers, Carolyn Mice, who wrote Anatomy of the Spirit, had talked about how most diseases and conditions are manifested by what is held in the energy field.
Yes.
And the energy field is quite large. It's anywhere between 4 to 6 feet around a person. And so this actually is a biographical expression of your internal biology and psychology.
Yes.
And so I totally support what you're saying in terms of how the diagnosis is already self-manifested in that area, in that arena. So then, how could a practitioner bring this particular information then to what they do?
When you say bring this information, the reason why I like the terminology authentic is because in my wide range of exposure, I've really seen two types of practitioners in the field.
Yeah.
Those with a true gift, and those who are, forgive the expression, who are wannabes. And what I've learned over the years is that it's not we who choose to be healers so much as it's spirit who chooses us.
Yeah.
But there are many who choose to be healers, and it may be hard for them to hear this interview, but they choose it because either they were healed themselves, or they find a particular modality very interesting and it speaks to them in some way. But the reality is that you cannot give something that is not yours to give. So when you say, how do we bring this forward in our practices, when I was pregnant, and every pregnant woman asks this question, how will I know when it's time or when I'm in labor? And everybody always just says, oh, you'll know. And I think it's much the same way with being a healer.
Yes.
And even at that, even the ones who are truly gifted go through a period of denial because they don't necessarily even want to know. And then there are those who are the opposite, who want to be healers and go through their period of denial in not real, seeing that they don't have a gift. Now, what I'm saying is, a lot of people take the time and trouble to go in and learn a modality and be trained in it. But I think generally for those who are authentic healers, it's the other way around. Your gift will present itself to you somehow, some way, and then again, they say when the student is ready, the teacher will come, and then the training will generally find its way into their lives to give some kind of form and structure to the healing modality. Um, Again, like I said, this may be difficult for some people to hear because they may have chosen that they want to be a healer. But in that, I might share a story about Condoleezza Rice, who, as you well know, most people listening to this video will know who Condoleezza Rice is. And she went to Stanford, a very, very accomplished lady in many, many ways.
Yes.
And she started out in the track of music, and her parents wanted her to play the piano, and much of her academic background and training was in music, and she was a very accomplished uh, pianist, and but she knew that after years and years and years of not only training and practice, she recognized within herself that she was not a virtuoso. She was not born with the gift, regardless of the extent of her learning and her training, and even the fact that she wanted to do it. She would never have that innate gift that is the difference between someone like her and someone who was born to be a virtuoso. And so she decided at that time to shift directions. And of course, we all know the career that the direction that she went in, which was a far greater acknowledgement of who she was and the path that Spirit had sent her to be on. But many of us go through this journey. In fact, we all do in one way, shape, or form, whether we're going on a journey of healing to be a healer or not. It's really the journey of learning the truth of who we are, and then the harder, the much more challenging journey of learning to acknowledge the truth, not just the positive things about who we are, but we all have shadows in our life that are also the truth of who we are. Absolutely. And so so my advice or admonition to those out there who are in healing practice, and
do you hear that?
I did.
Well, it started raining when our interview happened, so I take that as a good sign. The water bearers have heard.
Well, I guess I take it as a good sign too, but yeah. So what I was saying was that it's very challenging to acknowledge that truth, but that's really the journey I believe that we're all on, is finding the truth of who we are. And so despite my years, because my undergraduate degree, I have a double major, and one of those majors is in business, and I have over 25 years of experience in business prior to getting my PhD in psychology. But so I think I know a little bit about business. So my advice is, though, especially in this economy where we really are separating the wheat from the chaff, is to really self-examine and find that truth about yourself. If you are meant to be a healer, if you are an authentic healer, and you build it, they will come. I mean, your business will endure. It may not flourish in these difficult, challenging times, but it will endure, and because it comes, it's a gift of grace, and it comes through Spirit. So if you have that faith to hang in there and endure through the challenging times, you are meant to be that healer, and that will sustain itself. If you are meant to go down a different path, search yourself and try, challenging as it can be, try to acknowledge that truth and seek that out instead. And again, I'm not trying to be a pessimist here. For a lot of authentic healers, you know, it actually is just the opposite. And for those who are trying to force something onto spirit that it wasn't meant for them, I mean, you know, they're the ones that are going to struggle most. But like I said, but even authentic healers, my own path, I went literally having to be kicking and screaming and being dragged by spirit to really acknowledge that truth within myself, which is why I have 25 years of business experience, because this is the last thing that I ever imagined I would end up doing and being. But it wasn't until I came to those understandings and those truths about myself and was willing to surrender to that, it really literally blossomed for me. I didn't force it. I didn't make it.
Yes.
I literally sat, not only, well, and my girlfriend calls it sitting in the mist, where there's just, you're surrounded by the unknown. You don't know what the future holds. You're in the most dire of straits. Some people call it the dark night of the soul, if you will, because you have no clue. And that's how you learn faith. You just have to trust that spirit is gonna, cover this, and that you'll come out the other side and the mist will clear, and that's kind of the short version of certainly my own journey and story, is that this was not the direction I ever intended on heading, but it was in acknowledging and surrendering to the truth about myself. And so it can be just the opposite for those who want to be healers and then find out that maybe this isn't the direction you should go. But again, I say from personal experience that how you bring this forward in your work as a healer, as a practitioner, is really to truly have faith that you will endure. If you are authentic, you will endure even the most challenging of times. And it's really all about empowerment and not victimization. So don't say, oh, woe is me, I got laid off. Oh, woe is me, there's never enough money to pay the bills. It's not about woe is me. It's not about why is spirit doing this to me. I say to you, why not? Why not? How do we grow? We grow through the challenges and adversities that spirit puts before us. And so rather than saying, oh my gosh, I'm a victim and spirit is, giving my husband cancer and this and that, and how am I going to make ends meet? That's not what it's about. It's about empowerment. It's about acknowledging that spirit put these obstacles and challenges in our lives to help us to transcend them. And in that growth that happens as a result, that transformation that happens as a result of transcendence, we will, attract to us that energy in our lives, whether it's the energy of money, whether it's the energy of a growing healing practice, whether it's the energy of your reputation and people finding out who you are, and then the next thing you know, you got a line standing outside of your office, or your appointment calendar is booked for the next 3 months solid. I mean, these are not things that you can buy with money by putting ads on the TV, radio, or internet. They are things that spirit graces us with as a result of our own willingness to grow and transcend and transform into what spirit has, into our own gifts and what spirit has blessed us with and who we need to be. And I hope I've made sense, and I don't mean to sound preachy, but
you totally have made sense.
It's me.
Well, and you know what? It coming from someone with a business background too, one of the questions that I had asked was, ancient healers, they do their job. within the context of the tribe. And you're right, because of the gift that they've been given by Spirit and their surrender to that gift, the word of their works spreads naturally. So you have people that come from near and far to come and see them. That occurs even now. You know, people will travel all over the world to see gifted, well-renowned healers.
Yes, they will.
And, you know, these people, most of them have very little advertising. The big advertising they have comes from word of mouth. And
Yes.
so I really honor what you said about, you know, embodying that which you are in alignment with the path that you're supposed to be on. And
Yeah.
I have talked to many practitioners who advertise in magazines and things, and they get very little return on their investment, which is, I guess, another way to, I would ask you, because of your business background and your balance of this authentic wisdom and your exposure to different healing practices also, when a practitioner does surrender to the call, how can they keep that balance in their life between serving Spirit, serving their clients, and also at the same time nourishing themselves?
Well, that's a really excellent question, because I've also seen a lot of gifted healers who are just either extremely dysfunctional in their own personal lives,
Yeah.
or who are literally consumed by their calling, if you will. And keeping a balance is an easy thing. One of the first things I would say as a business person, especially for the realm of holistic healers who are often viewed as charlatans, I say, you know, your ethics must be impeccable. And if you're not going to be, then get out of the field, because you give us all a bad name. You really do. You make us all look like charlatans. So unless your ethics are impeccable, you know, you really shouldn't be doing this, because it is an honorable profession. Those who are truly authentic follow the call of Spirit. And so that's not something that you mess with lightly, because it has a way of coming back to you when you don't.
Yes.
But in keeping the balance, first of all, I would offer admonishment from my own spiritual background and tradition. And that is that Hawaiians believe that we call this mana'o, which is our thoughts and our mind. And then this is pu'uvai, which is the heart, which is symbolic of the emotions. And then there is the na'au, which is the gut. Okay, and we've all heard that expression, gut instinct. Well, for the Hawaiian, and then here, not necessarily the crown, I'm not necessarily talking about energy or chakras, but basically beyond us, okay, that realm of energy that, like you said, that extends beyond us, that's our connection to Spirit, to our own truth, to our greatness, to everything else. And so the teachings are that the heart and the mind can be fickle. And to give you an example, we often rationalize when we know the truth of something. We'll often rationalize to ourselves, to justify, we make excuses and we convince ourselves otherwise, when the little voice is telling us and we're going, yes, but yes, but yes, but yes, and this is how I can do it, but if I do this, and what about that, and we make all these excuses and we rationalize and we talk ourselves out of that. So that's one test to know that your mind is not always going to be truthful with you. Okay, your heart is the same way. Have you ever been just emotionally elated and happy, and then something happened, and literally 30 seconds later, you're like, oh, you know? There again, emotions can be deceptive. They're not necessarily consistent, and they're not necessarily truthful, because the reality is, until you got that bad news, everything in your life was going well and you were happy. And then all of a sudden you get this phone call and your whole world is changed. What did it really? Did it really change? No, but your emotions changed. And so heart and mind are necessary tools for their existential tools. We need them to cope with life and to do things. But they are not truthful tools in that they are not consistent. Your gut instinct, your na'au, which is also the same thing as your intuition, that is always consistent. It cannot be fooled, and that is the truth. That's where truth comes from. That's what we believe. When I say we, that's the Hawaiian tradition, if you will, or understanding of where truth comes from. It comes from the gut, the instinct. And when you listen to that and you align your emotions and your thoughts up to be congruent with the truth that your body, the na'au is your visceral instinct, but that's also your physical, when you line that truth up, and so that it's congruent with what your body is telling you, then that is real truth. Okay, only when we're congruent are we then plugged in or connected to the greater spirit, to the greatness of spirit, which is our own greatness, which is our own truth. And so when those things are in alignment and congruent, then you know that you're heading in the right direction and on the right path. If this doesn't agree with this, it's like dancers. Heart and mind are like dancers that keep stepping on each other's feet, because no one has been actually designated as the leader for the dance. And so you have these two fumblers and bumblers, but when they are both aligned and congruent with our visceral instinct or our gut instinct, then you see this beautiful dance that helps us to move gracefully through life, even through the most difficult of challenges, So I say, as a business person, don't strictly follow what you think you should be doing or what you feel you should be doing. Follow what you know you should be doing by aligning heart and mind with your intuition, with your instinct, and then you get rid of all that ego hogwash and things that would really steer you in the wrong direction or really cause a lot of that dysfunction. And when you have congruence, it's easier to keep and maintain a balance in your life, and know that you have to honor yourself in as much as you honor all other things, whether it's your gift for healing or whether it's paying your bills on time. You need to honor, have honor in the way you conduct yourself, which is why I was saying your ethics, in the way you conduct yourself with all things. We lie to ourselves most often of all, more so than we would to anybody else. We lie to ourselves and we say, I can skip breakfast today because I'm late, and no, can you really? Because next thing you know, 16 hours later, all you've been running on is coffee and caffeine, and where's the taking care of self? Where's the taking care of the body, the precious gift that we have each been given? So when I say honoring, be honoring and be ethical I'm talking about, like I said, all things, your bills, taking care of yourself. And when you walk in the world in that way, with honor, to honor the ground that you're stepping on, as well as the body that you're living in, as well as the relationships you're interacting with, as well as the commitments you are making, and you keep a congruence between mind, heart, and intuition, so that you're always, that so that you're connected and plugged into spirit as much as possible. And by the way, we have a term for that. And I don't know if you noticed my email address, but when you're in alignment, then you're congruent with spirit. We have a term in Hawaiian, which is the same, by the way, for Maori, because again, it's a very ancient word, and it's called pono, P-O-N-O. Mm-hmm. So my email address is always pono, so it helps to remind me even, more so than on a daily basis, because I'm on a computer all day long, so it's constant. I'm getting emails, I'm sending emails, but every time I read that, it puts me in check, and it helps me to acknowledge spirit in my life by staying pono. Now that, the direct Western translation is truth, but really there's so much more meaning behind than just that, TRUTH, 5-letter word. There's so much more meaning, and that's the meaning that I'm talking about, that congruence with spirit, that help you keep a balance in your life by honoring everything that is in your life. And our most common greeting in Hawaiian, you've all heard the word aloha, but it's really aloha kaua, which means hello and greetings, but it doesn't just mean greetings to you. Aloha kaua means greetings to both you and I, because it always acknowledges the self as being equally as significant to the relationship than everything else outside of us. We are part of one and the same. Again, we're connected. So we are just important in the big scheme of things, just as sacred as all these other things. And so in Western culture, and that separation of mind and body, they're dual states, where spirit is something out there and physical is right here, and my mind is not, that's why I say non-dual states of consciousness. It's that acknowledgement and awareness that everything is connected and it's all one. So when we're in that mode, I think we're more able to find a balance and create a balance for ourselves. Because believe me, I speak from experience. I mean, I've been through some very, very challenging events in my life, and it was only by living in that way. And I get out of whack. I'll freely admit, I get out of whack plenty.
It's part of being human.
Pardon me?
It's part of being human to occasionally get out of whack.
Exactly. Yeah, it's hard to stay. Even monks, monks devote their entire lives to trying to do this, and they can't do it all the time. And we're just everyday people living in the real world. So, but if you stay conscious of it, it doesn't mean you have to meditate 24/7. But if you stay conscious of this connection, and you realize what it's all about, and the more you practice it, the better you get at it. It's the consciousness of realizing this. It really puts things into perspective. What's important? What's less important? What's a higher priority versus a lower one? I mean, like I said, I have been through some significant challenges, and the way that I always find my grounding and find my way back to spirit is to align them all as one. And in that, it helps to keep a better balance. And I'll be the first, I'm not trying to preach here, I'll be the first to say my life is not in perfect balance, nor is it always in perfect balance. But I think if I didn't live this way, it would be a heck of a lot worse than the crazy life I live now, trying to juggle and do as much as I do.
Yes.
But that's really what helps me. And so hopefully it'll help somebody out there who's listening.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Wendy. You've covered so much of the questions I've asked and even more. So,
wonderful questions. Thank you for inviting me. I do appreciate it.
And I really honor the work that you have done, not only in your own life, also with the work with the Waitaha Grandmothers, and keeping the importance of our authentic traditions in the forefront, because it's very easy, I think, in this time where we live in a very highly technological world and new advancements are coming up so fast with technology that people don't always remember their roots and how to tap back into that centered place inside. And the centered place doesn't exist in all these multimedia tools or anything outside of us. So I really appreciate your emphasis in really aligning with Great Spirit, because that's the foundation for a really strong healing practice, I feel.
Well, thank you, Anne. That is a really excellent thought, but I would remind people, because I don't knock technology.
I love it. We wouldn't have this conversation if we didn't have it.
I think one of the areas that my doctoral work has taken me in reaching back into the ancient times, I really see how wise and sophisticated and complex they were. Western society has this fallacy of primitivism. And the farther back you go, the more primitive human cultures become. And I think it's a really misguided fallacy, because you don't have to have the bells and whistles to have the complexity and sophistication of knowledge and wisdom at hand. I mean, there are many ancient mysteries out there that Western society can't even begin to fathom how they occurred. And that's because they live in this fallacy of, primitivization, that, if you go back in time, then, people were, dumber and dumber and less able or capable. And it's really what I've found in my extensive studies is it's really quite the opposite.
Yes.
And, we are slowly regaining that complexity and sophistication that the ancients had, and a lot of it is through modern technology like computers and the internet.
Oh, yes.
But we don't know how to embody it in the way that the ancients did, because that energy and all of that was embodied within them. So they didn't need a laptop computer to send. I don't need I'm speaking to you now over Skype and my laptop computer, but thousands of years ago, I probably could have just sat in a quiet place and said a prayer and reached out to you through my mind and through my soul and said, Anne, I miss you, and I hope you're doing okay. Because when the earthquake and the tidal waves just happened in Japan not too long ago, I bolted up in the middle of the night out of literally a deep sleep. I bolted up and I'm like, oh my gosh, something must have happened, because this doesn't happen to me unless something like this does happen. And I made a point of looking at the clock. And so then it was just, then a few minutes later, I fell back asleep, and it was very mysterious to me. And so the next day, then I woke up, and there was a text message from my sister saying, oh, there's a tidal wave coming, so we've been evacuated and blah, 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 because this was in Hawaii, because the tidal wave came as a result of what was happening in Japan. So I thought, wow, I wonder if that has something to do with why I woke up, but everybody seems to be fine and nothing has really happened yet. Well, so I investigated it just out of sheer curiosity. And I looked at the U.S. Website for the U.S. Geological Survey, and I looked at the time of the earthquakes and the whatever tidal waves in Japan, and it was nothing. It wasn't even remotely close to the time that I had bolted up out of bed. And then I thought, oh, wait a minute, I'm I'm not that connected to Japan or anyone there. So then I looked at Hawaii. And to the very minute, my clock doesn't have a second hand because it's a digital clock, but to the very minute that I bolted out of bed here in Ohio, it was literally the very moment that the earthquake that happened in Hawaii, because there were earthquakes in Hawaii as well at the from the same seismic activity that was occurring in Japan, but the epicenter was over towards Japan, so they got hit a little harder. But it was that very minute that it touched Hawaii. But I'm so connected that this is just one occurrence of many kinds of things that have happened to me. But I'm just so connected that I knew it. I could feel it. I could sense it, or at least my soul did, because of that connection. And it wasn't until the next morning that I found the text message, that my sister texted me once. She didn't wake up. They had to be evacuated in the middle of the night. But this was hours later. But when I had woken up, it was when everything just first started. And that was Spirit telling me, you need to know this because you're connected. This is what's happening. So back in the day, the ancients really embodied all of that. They didn't need computers and internet to find out when the earthquake hit Hawaii on the U.S. Geological Survey. They already knew because they could sense it, they could feel it. And so technology is a great thing. It's helping us catch up to the ancients, but it certainly was not the other way around. We are far less sophisticated and intelligent today than we were way back when. And you know what? We are supercomputers, and it's all in here, but we just need to we need to find it and recover it. And that's just a small example of the capacity of our greatness that we hold. So I hope that people who hear this will realize what's within them and how powerful they truly are, and tap into that by looking inward and then connecting to Spirit, because that's like plugging it in, right? Plugging into it's the power of Spirit, but the resources are within us.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely agree with you with the process of how we as a civilization, a society, are actually coming back into remembering our innate abilities, which was one of the reasons why I was so interested in being able to meet with you, being able to be around the Waitaha Grandmothers, because I'm very much interested in wanting to remember so that I can utilize as much of my time here on this earthly plane in this lifetime to do the work that Spirit wants me to do in as much of the highest vibration and in Hono as possible.
Exactly.
So, yes.
Exactly.
And
well, I think you're on the right track, certainly.
Thank you. And there, for us who are all in alignment and remembering and taking that path and walking that path, I definitely agree with you that we can feel these earth changes happening. The poles of the moon, the poles of certain comets coming through, asteroids coming through, and just the frequency of the earthquakes, tornadoes, and hurricanes. It's part of our transition and change right now. And so I honor everyone in being able to hold that space to help our planet, our Earth Mother, move through this. It's like she's giving birth.
Yeah, exactly. Wise words. And if I could just say one final thing.
Yes.
I've talked a lot about Spirit and the connection to Spirit with regard to ancient, authentic, indigenous, but you bring up a good point, and that is nature. Nature surrounds us. We are not separate from nature, but we are part of it. And nature is permeated with Spirit and the gifts of Spirit. If we listen to the wind, it will speak to us. It will tell us what we need to know. If we, you know, sit up under a tree, it will embrace us with its energy. It will help to heal us. Um, Nature is full of cycles and patterns and wisdom that it will teach us if we can be still enough and observant enough and open enough to appreciate what it has to offer. And that is in large part where the ancients learned their wisdom, is really through the vehicle of nature. And that has really been lost in modern day Western society. And so that was really just one of the last things I would like to say is that don't deny the power and the wisdom that you can find in nature. I mean, a lot of us don't have the spiritual wherewithal to hold conversations with our long past ancestors. You know, it's not in our belief system. It's not something that we, you know, that we're open enough to because of the fears that we have been conditioned by or whatever. But you know, how many of us are scared of a tree or haven't stood in the wind and heard it whistle past our you know, our face and heard it with our ears? We've all been in nature. We need to just start acknowledging that. You know, if you don't have the spiritual tools to commune with spirit and your ancestors in the way that you would want, well, guess what? You have gazillions of ancestors right in nature that are happy to teach you, to embrace you. All you have to do is be open to it. And but nature is I think nature is the most powerful thing that's on this planet, and that we have at our disposal as a resource for wisdom, you know, for learning and wisdom. So never underestimate that, ever.
Definitely.
So yeah.
Well, thank you so very much, Wendy.
Oh,
It's just been a
thank
great
you.
conversation. I've had so much fun. And
Yes, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. This is a nice treat.
yes, absolutely. And please let me know when you do decide to come back down to Texas, any other works that you decide to do with the Waitaha or any other grandmothers, and we will definitely spread the word and hold that sacred space with you.
We'll be sure and let you know, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you. Have a
Okay.
wonderful and blessed week.
You too. You
All right.
too.
Take
Very
care.
much. Okay.
Bye.
Bye bye.